Hello and welcome from me and Diamond as we all look forward to Viking cruises again in the very near future. Everybody's very, very excited about it in Viking because it has now been announced. They're all calling it Operation Restart. And indeed, here in the UK, they are starting with the Viking Venus. And Restart Cruises will start with what they're calling England's Scenic Shores. I'll be joining the ship as godmother, of course. And in America, they've just this week announced Restart Cruises around Bermuda and Iceland. Already there have been lots of lovely messages coming in from guests saying Viking is back. There's the Viking Venus. Can't wait to see her. I haven't seen her yet in real life. So there really is excitement all round now. Something to look forward to at last. Well, now to our Thursday interview. And this week is Science Week. Over the past year, the needs of the pandemic have certainly challenged our scientists, haven't they? From fighting the virus with new vaccines to allowing us to video call each other, family and friends all over the world. Who would have thought just a decade ago that we would find that commonplace? Our newfound reliance on technology, screen time, and social media also gets a lot of negative reviews as well. But there are, of course, two sides to that story. And today we're going to meet one of the quite brilliant brains who's working from within the techie industry, actually within the mighty Google, to enhance human life. He works mostly on, get this, utilizing machine learning for image understanding, computational photography and sound understanding, ethical hacking and artificial intelligence and JavaScript. He's won multiple awards for his work in tech competitions and hackathons. Now, this morning, I didn't even know what a hackathon actually is. It sounds like he talks a different language from you and I, but he is here to explain all. For instance, have a look at this. One of the hugest problems on Earth, but one which he reckons computer science and artificial intelligence, AI, can help. So here's the question. What do you think is the most dangerous creature on our planet?
The deadliest animal in the world kills more people each year than every other animal combined, makes hundreds of millions of people sick, and is half the length of a staple. It's the mosquito. And a lot of mosquitoes are bad bugs. Like one species, Aedes aegypti. These bad bugs bite, and these bad bugs breed. They're an invasive species that spreads diseases like Zika, dengue, and chikungunya, diseases that stop people from working and going to school. Most of these diseases don't have effective vaccines, so that means we have to stop the bad bugs. Except pesticides can be toxic, and clearing standing water is not enough because people can never find all the places that bad bugs live. So they almost always come back, biting and breeding. We need a better way to stop the bad bugs. Luckily, there are good bugs. They're the same kind of mosquito, but good bugs can't bite. Good bugs can't breed. And most importantly, good bugs can stop bad bugs. How? Well, nature, with a little bit of science mixed in. You raise mosquitoes that have a naturally occurring bacteria that makes it so they can't breed with bad bugs. Then you separate the males, because male mosquitoes can't bite. Then, when you release those males into the wild, they find bad bugs to mate with. But their eggs won't hatch, because of the bacteria in the good bug. So the next generation gets smaller, and smaller, and smaller, until all the bugs are practically gone. And unlike other methods, good bugs are harmless, and they naturally know exactly where to find bad bugs, because they're, bugs. Pretty good, right? Except for this to work, you need a lot of good bugs. And making a lot of good bugs is really, really hard. That's why we're starting Debug, a project to develop better technology to raise more good bugs. Technology like bug sorting algorithms, bug tracking sensors, and bug raising robots. That's right, bug raising robots. And with more good bugs in more places, it might finally be possible to stop the spread of mosquito-borne diseases. That way, more people could go to work. More people could go to school. More people could go outside without worrying about getting sick. And bad bugs could be a problem that's just as small as they are.
So, extraordinary project, isn't it? Let's meet the man behind such algorithms and designs. Sagar Savla, joining us from his home in San Francisco. Hello and welcome.
Hey. Nice to meet you, Anne.
Oh, it's lovely to meet you. Tell us more about that amazing project. In what way are you involved? What did you do?
Yeah, so the project is pretty fun. Growing up in Bombay, I used to really despise mosquitoes. And so it's really rewarding to be able to work on a project that allows me to do something in this regard. And the key element of the project about figuring out that particular breed of mosquitoes, and then there is a machine that we use to identify between male mosquitoes and female mosquitoes. So my research team has worked with the Verily group to create the algorithm and the models to help differentiate between a male mosquito and a female mosquito, because when we are breeding them, we don't really know. But only at a certain stage of the larvae, like around day 6 or so, can we identify them. And once we identify them, we want to just continue growing the male ones, as we saw in the video, that don't bite and that are usually sterilized with the Wolbachia virus. And then the idea is that once we do that, then these mosquitoes are bred, and then we release them into the wild in certain populations in a very planned and strategic way.
What I don't understand is when I read up about that, it said that AI is involved, artificial intelligence. In what way? Can you explain it in ways that we would understand?
So I think the clear example is going for, let's say, to be able to differentiate between a male mosquito and a female mosquito, it's not just a bunch of rules. It used to take, I think, even a trained expert or a biologist in this field, it would take up to like 60 seconds for them to make a decision on like, is this a male or a female, just from the photos of the mosquito. And we want to be able to do that really fast for a whole lot of mosquitoes. And so, of course, the problem wouldn't scale if we even if we had access to like a big set of experts who were willing to do this kind of work. And so what we did was, instead of creating rules like, hey, if the mosquito looks like this, it's probably male, or if it looks like this, it's female, we just gave a machine a whole bunch of images, and it tells us using artificial intelligence or machine learning that this is most likely male, this is most likely female. And as long as we can get the accuracy rate really high, as close as possible to the human expert, which we usually can't meet. But if we can get them very close, we are good enough to go ahead with the rest of the project.
We'll go into, if we may, what the difference between AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning is in a moment. First of all, though, I know everybody watching at the moment will want to know, I mean, is this project actually in action somewhere? Are good mosquitoes being released anywhere in the world? And how effective is it proving?
So the sterile insect technique itself is kind of old and used in academics for a long time, like at least since the 60s. This particular mosquito project, trials have begun in Fresno, California, which is like in Central Valley. And it's like we work very closely with the government bodies like EPA and FDA, etc., to make sure that these trials go well. And as soon as we get better results, then we will proceed further. Of course, the pandemic kind of pushed down our timeline a bit, but if we continue to make progress, I'm pretty sure that we will be able to make a good case for these.
And are you confident that one day it will make a difference?
I would really hope so. The key element is that I don't really think that this project is the one that should make the impact. As long as, like, based on the different efficacy measures of like how do we deal with dengue spread, be it using the sterile insect technique like in this project, or be it like using better access to vaccinations, or be it access to better resources like hospital facilities. I think whichever method works to help reduce the fatalities with dengue, which is already a cured disease, is the best solution.
So let's come to the big question then. Artificial intelligence, scares a lot of people. Not you, maybe, but it gets a very bad press in the science fiction world, doesn't it? It's always about smart robots taking over the world and figuring out that we humans are dispensable. So what is the difference between artificial intelligence, which we ordinary people think of as robots, basically computers starting to think beyond our brains, and machine learning, which is giving machines data and them simply using it? That's a scenario that we sort of have control of. AI, though, frightens us.
Right. It's a very good question, and it's kind of like has a bunch of different facets. One thing that is very clear that across all the years that I did in my grad school in machine learning and human-computer interaction, I never worked on a robot. So like the whole aspect of association that AI is equal to robots, and we do that often because we need some stock photography for our articles. It's usually not really that common. And in terms of the particular aspect of like what is the difference between AI versus ML, I would say that as far as most people are using it right now in mass media, it doesn't really matter. There are some differences, and like scientists within our community like do go back and forth. It's very clear that the AI word is more something that came from the science fiction world, and so like it has a bit of a broader appeal. ML is a bit more of a technical term. Sometimes it is considered to be a subset of AI, but the issue is that regardless of the term, as long as you think that semantically they are the same, as far as like most people in the world are concerned, we can move on to the actual questions, right? Like this is why does it feel scary? Like, why is it something that is really revolutionary? The key element of both AI or ML, and from going forward, I'll just use any word synonymously, is that the difference between you have to understand the how computers used to work currently versus like how computers could work with AI, and the major difference in how they perform. And that is, I think, the key element of what makes this really foundationally different.
I know when you explain this to certain audiences, you use the example, for instance, of the Google car at the moment, which is machine learning from its environment. I think we've got some pictures of
Yeah,
this.
so an example that I give often is like this is a self-driving car, like one of the test cars that exist from many different that in the self-driving car industry, and you can see that there's a camera on the top. And let's like approach the very small problem of being able to understand, in the grand scheme of things, a small problem, being able to understand the speed limit of the road that you're driving on. Of course, the car needs to do, like a driver needs to do a lot more things, but like for example, being able to recognize that this is 80 kilometers per hour, it needs to understand, okay, you could do this with rules. You could like write, okay, if you find a red circle on a notice board, and inside if you find something that looks like two circles attached to each other, that's an 8. If it's a bigger circle, that's a 0, so on and so forth. And then you have to like write more rules because, okay, this is 50 kilometers per hour, but hey, there's something else happening here. Domingo, which I think this one is in Brazil, so this is probably Sunday, it says like 40 kilometers per hour that day. All right, I need to write more rules to be able to recognize those particular characters and that particular image. Okay, now we are at about 20 or 30 rules. Oh, what is this one? This is 40 kilometers per hour, but it's also written upwards. Okay, I need to make sure that my rules don't break if it like finds a speed limit sign somewhere where it is not expecting it on the side of the road. So now this is 40 kilometers per hour. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
And then this is 400.
Now this is interesting because somebody has graffitied on an extra O.
Exactly. And so a human, like, and you probably are seeing this for the first time, and you could recognize this instantly, right? But what if, because of my rules, that 0 does look like a 0, the last 0, right? It could be considered 400. Of course, it should not be considered it at all. And so how do we go about creating rules such that we don't accidentally insert a loophole? And so that's where like we come across this concept of learning by examples. Like if you remember like how we learned how to make food or like breakfast at home, or like the very first thing, we would see that, okay, you were not given like a whole manuscript of 100 pages. Like, yeah, you learn all these rules and you would make the best porridge ever. It's usually like you learn by examples. You see your parents cooking, you try it once. Usually the first time is not edible, but then eventually you make something edible and tasty. And that's kind of how we do for machine learning, where instead of this, what if we gave them 1 million or 10,000 images of speed limit signs and let it itself learn its own rules instead of humans writing the rules? And then we just keep testing it. So this is another example. Like, I think these are signs in Sweden or Scandinavia. Yeah. And like you have 60 here, okay, cool. But like maybe there's some warning sign about whatever is written below that, and maybe it's something that the car needs to understand or a driver would need to understand. This is another example of 40. And so like these are a bit of an easier example, but these don't have the unit written. So it needs to ensure that it knows the rest of the context and the environment. This one is saying that it's 40, but hey, also take care that there's a speed bump coming up ahead, right? So these are like some complex signs that instead of creating our own rules, humans kind of just figure out, like including how we learn to how to drive, right? We just got a bunch of examples. We practiced a bit in our area, did our test, and boom, like we slowly get better and better day by day.
But giving a car or the car's computer a million examples of things that it can learn from, that's machine learning, yes? But has it ever... I mean, and you use the analogy of us learning how to make breakfast as little human beings. But at some stage when we make breakfast, we show some sort of initiative. Does a machine or a computer ever show initiative?
That's a very good question. It's rare. It's unless like you actually want it to do that. You have to understand that these are still algorithms. Like once you train it, a machine learning algorithm will kind of behave almost predictably in a certain aspect, as long as you give the same input and it'll kind of give you the same output. In terms of creating initiative, there is some research going on in this space of like people trying to do proactive stuff. I would say that it's still very nascent at this stage to really understand. Another way that people ask this is like about the human creativity aspect. And again, that is something that we haven't yet found to be as true. There are some like text generation or like article generation bots that you might like come across or like machine learning models. But then those are all usually very constrained in the kind of things that they can do.
Who knows what the future may bring. Tell me about the invention that you've been part of for a way for smart technology to listen in the rainforest for illegal chainsaws. How on earth does that work?
Yeah, so this one is interesting. This is Topher White from Rainforest Connection. It's a nonprofit. And he had this idea of like, hey, what if we attach a tiny little cheap little Android phone, attach it with solar batteries and attach it to really tall trees high up there. And in big forests, let's say in Brazil or Indonesia, etc., and mount like multiple phones in multiple different like square kilometer area. And these are just always listening for the forest sounds. So you can actually go to rfcx.org and listen to one of these rainforests live right now. And it's beautiful, like you usually hear birds chirping, etc. But his main motivation was a chainsaw sound. Turns out deforestation is the biggest thing that we could actually affect that will help climate change or like help us counter climate change.
Yes.
And so his goal is that how do we stop illegal deforestation? A lot of the deforestation that happens is usually in grounds where the ranger doesn't know about it in the forest. So if we can hear a chainsaw sound, and if we do it from, let's say, 3 different trees, and chainsaw sounds can go for miles in a silent little forest, right? And so you can detect it from a phone and use that signal and tell the ranger that, hey, a chainsaw sound was detected at this particular time in this particular location. And they can go there either with their helicopters, drones, or with their own trucks and kind of stop the deforestation in its own legs, like while it happens. And it's a great project. And the main reason of how, one of the prime motivations of how it works is that there is this machine learning model and the data set that my team had released a few years ago called AudioSet, and it is able to detect about 500 plus different sound event classes like dog barking, baby crying, and chainsaw sounds in this case, and bird chirping, for example. And it uses that model to understand that, hey, a chainsaw sound was detected. Sometimes a human might review it further if the model is not as confident. And then it'll then create an alert for the rangers in that area. that, hey, chains of custody is possible.
And that's such a positive use of new technology. You can, I'm sure that particular smartphone is probably detecting my dog barking at the moment. But yeah, that's a really positive use of new technology that you don't hear enough about, because new technology does get a bad press. We're all so scared of it. But do you think that's just because we're ignorant of it?
I wouldn't say that ignorant. I think that would be too strong of a word. In some aspects, of course, the technology itself, like as people in the field, it's also our responsibility to make sure that we communicate things better and better and make things more accessible. These kind of examples are just growing more and more, like Rainforest Connection or Project Debug, of like using this kind of technology for more good. It's something that has always kind of existed. Academics at heart who are making this research usually have that utopia in their head that is motivating them, that, hey, if I do this, then I should be able to like help forests or like help and the environment or help like human healthcare, etc.
Well, exactly. And as we saw in the earlier video, the fight against dengue fever, for instance, or come to it, I suppose any disease can be helped in that way. I mean, you look at the map and you see the devastation that it is causing and the difference that maybe can be made.
Yeah, it's a big distribution challenge if you think about it, right? Like if we already know the cure for dengue, as long as like we can get healthcare resources early enough to the patient, why are people still having fatalities with that? And that is something that we really need to, that's like something that humanity together needs to come together to be able to get a solution.
And I know that at the end of a lot of your lectures, and we'll talk in a minute about the enormous lectures you give to absolute hundreds and hundreds of people, but you talk about the curb cut effect. And is that a demonstration of the way that simple things can make life better for all of us?
Yeah, that is something that we use a lot. So there is this app, for example, that my team created at Google called Live Transcribe, which is like gives captions for the deaf and hard of hearing in real time. And one of the arguments that we make is that curbs used to look like that pavement, that photo that we showed, right? And if you look at how accessibility measures happened, eventually, because of accessibility measures, cities had to design their curbs such that they had a gradient. And once they created that gradient, now you suddenly have the same gradient being useful for a whole bunch more people. Of course, wheelchair users definitely benefit from that, but of course, people with strollers and people with travelers and anything that has wheels on it. So there's this idea called the curb cut effect. It was named, I think, in 1970s, where if you create something for just one person or like make something more accessible for even like one set of people, it can actually help benefiting everybody with the concept of situational disabilities. So for example, usually we might be a hearing person, but if you go into a very noisy cafe, we are kind of behaving in a hard of hearing manner because we can't really hear the other person. So there's this situational disability that almost all of us will face for everything, including vision, hearing, mobility, cognitive, etc.
Absolutely. And I guess the pandemic as well, when you think of the way that, Zoom calling, Skype calling, video conferencing was only used by certain people and is now, as I was saying earlier, almost commonplace for all of us. I mean, everybody's aunties and uncles and grandmas and grandfathers are using it now.
Yeah, it's something that has like completely, people in the tech industry were like, yeah, this is something that we have had since 2000s. But it's amazing to see the world come closer together like this.
Oh, absolutely. So there are you working for Google, but how did you start? There are going to be lots of people watching at the moment. So how do you get into that sort of industry? What happened to you?
It's a good question. I was born and brought up in Bombay, India, where I did my undergrad in engineering, in computer engineering, at the local university. Once I did that, I started doing a lot of side projects with like creating websites, like helping some projects in like the data science space. And that's when I started dabbling in competitions. I used that to get admitted into grad school at Georgia Tech in the US. And once I was there, I started doing a whole lot more in terms of, because of the access to opportunities, I was doing a lot more competitions. I was doing a lot of hackathons. I heard you say A hackathon is essentially a competition that happens for a limited amount of time, like usually around 48 hours, where the concept is like on a Friday night, you start the competition, and till Sunday morning or afternoon, you're staying up and you're just coding away on a certain project. You come together with a team. Sometimes most of the times I meet my team there. This is a photo, for example, of me in a Formula 3 racing club in my grad school, where we would build our own Formula 3 hybrid cars and race them across in different competitions across the US. And again, the idea of like getting from computer engineering to being able to do core machine learning started with like these kind of different competitions.
Yes.
This is like the photos of different competition wins that I had in different hackathons, where we created things from an app that could help you find your local groceries to an app. In this case, I was judging a competition called Dementia Hack, where our winners were creating an app and a system that helped for early diagnosis of certain dementia ailments. And the goal has always been to be able to create a very initial concept that really validates your idea. And once you have that, taking that forward and seeing how you can do better. This, for example, is a photo from the Global Game Hackathon, where we created a game that tries to see if you have neurocognitive onset neurocognitive disorders. The idea was just to see, like, just from a game, like by playing a level repeatedly, let's say every day, can you notice certain cognitive patterns? And it's been just a fun journey of like going from there to like participating in competitions and getting more feedback like that.
Yeah, and getting awards and getting noticed, I guess. And just to prove that you don't spend all of your time in front of a screen, because I know a lot of people in the business are worried about that. You actually do an awful lot of outdoor activities too, don't you?
Yeah, my grad school was fun in that sense. We went caving a lot. I joined the local caving grotto, as they call them, these clubs. And caving, for the uninitiated, it's like you just identify a whole bunch of caves in your area and you go with hard hats and headlamps in a completely dark cave. Sometimes you have to crawl through very tiny little tunnels. Sounds awful, but like you go with a very good set of people, usually better trained people, and that can guide you well. I would also do a lot of whitewater kayaking. I learned whitewater kayaking for the first time there itself, and we did it in a whole bunch of rivers up to class 3 rapids. I also started doing a lot of hiking, which was usually how I met a lot of people, as well as like caught up with a bunch of my friends where like, hey, let's go for a hike here or there. And that was like, I've done the tallest peak in Scandinavia, Galdhøpiggen, did the tallest mountain on earth, Mauna Kea. And it's been a fun little journey of doing different kind of hikes, both in my Bay Area as well as other places I visit.
A fun little journey, eh? But I think a lot of people, again, will say it's really, I mean, I know that industry, and Google is particularly famous for it. It's very, very important to get your guys who are in front of computers all day, guys and girls, and get them doing something else, even if it's just mucking about or relaxing or playing table tennis or whatever. And you've been very lucky, actually, to get some very interesting internships, I think, from the beginning. Although the first picture here, I don't know, not this one. Oh, that's a different one. Is that there was one picture of you looking as though you were just in charge of the photocopier or something?
Yeah, so this is a screen printing press. Like it's a letterpress printing, and the idea was this actually exists on campus in the Bay Area tech campuses, and if we want to create our own posters or like tiny little designs for whatever different projects we want to do, we can just access it. There are people who will teach us how to use these very vintage technologies, I would say. And it was a fun little journey to understand how like these things work, not the posters or the prints that we just see all around us.
But you have managed to get some internships with some pretty big deal companies, which must have been very exciting. What was that one, for instance?
Yeah, so this one is like Nintendo did a partnership with Facebook when they were creating the Mario Maker world, and they had like a whole little hackathon. We participated in it, and as part of like some of the team wins, we had a whole bunch of fun with photos and whatnot.
Oh, it's lovely. I mean, and that just shows that it's, oh, here we go, and there you go. See,
and you know, which office is complete without a ball pit, right? Every office needs a ball pit, I would say. And this is, I'm pretty sure every Google office has one somewhere, and it's just a matter of finding it.
And to a certain extent, Google has paved the way on that, because lots of other tech companies have thought we should do something like that too, haven't they? Now,
Yeah,
I don't know what this is. You're going to have to explain.
So I think this is called an octobike. It's 8 people on a single bike, where one person is steering that wheel and everybody else is kind of helping propel the bike forward in that direction with their pedals. And it's like it's of course something that you can only do recreationally in like controlled little roads or residential roads. And we have these like on campus in the Google Mountain View area where we can actually book them as a team, and we try to even do a meeting on this where like kind of like, hey, let's go for this cafe, and everybody get on this bike and we'll just bike to that point, and it's still like everybody's looking at each other. Of course, the one person steering has to make sure that everything is clear, but the rest of them can continue.
And the way you speak about what you do, and as well as the things that you do, those sort of activities, it sounds as though life is fun.
I would say it is. They definitely make sure that our inconveniences are taken care of. There's like free food everywhere, which is I think everybody keeps talking about. But it's also very rewarding in the long sense, because I often say that the people I work with are like very smart. Like I'm always excited to when I wake up, like, hey, this is going to be exciting to like go out and like create something with them. And the best part is like I'm usually the dumbest person in the room, but they are nice enough to not make me feel like that. This, for example, is a photo of a theater in the Google Zurich office where we had a full-fledged cinema theater for people to like create their own little movie nights.
Well, that's how great ideas start, actually, isn't it? By letting people with big brains probably relax together and just talk and fire ideas off each other. And that's, oh yeah, there you are, of course, doing the ultimate ping pong. That you see more and more.
Yeah, I used to suck at ping pong, and I think I've like really improved, at least to some degree, where I'm still at the novice level. And this is like a bunch of ping pong tables, including a ping pong machine for you to practice without needing another partner. And on the back, you can see a music stage with like a drum set and a guitar and whatnot, where sometimes a bunch of Googlers, as people at Google are employees at Google are called, would come together and create a music band.
Do you know, the first office I ever worked in, it was a newspaper office. We were just thrilled when we got a coffee machine. Things have moved on, thank goodness. Now, it's interesting, I find, that not only do you do what you do your job and you clearly enjoy it, and thinking of new projects all the time. But it seems to me that doing your job, you also have to be an advocate, almost an evangelist for your business. And that has taken you into the realm of being able to talk to vast numbers of people in big theatres. Doesn't scare you, clearly. It's the most amazing sight watching you speak to all of those people.
Yeah, so it used to. My mom really made sure that I would participate in like elocution competitions as a kid. So I guess maybe that's where it started. But I found this, I think initially in the interview we mentioned of how like there's this big gap of how people understand what AI is and what people in the field of AI actually think what it is. And my whole usual intention with these talks is to help more and more people understand that, hey, AI is like not necessarily this big, bad, uncertain, like hazy little thing that's out there. It's something that you can actually approach, you can figure out, you can probably even use it in your business or your work, and like what are the different applications for them. And so like usually my conversations are around how do we use AI in more and more meaningful ways across the world.
Yes. Well, speaking of which, let's move on to Live Transcribe. Can you explain what it is? I know it's an app that helps deaf people, but what is it? How does it work? And I gather your grandmother, who suffers from deafness because of old age, I think you're particularly thinking of her when you're working on it.
Yes. So one of the things, I'm just pulling up the app on my phone, but So Live Transcribe is an app made for the deaf and hard of hearing, which gives real-time captions for free in about 80 different languages. The idea is that if I'm a hard of hearing person talking with somebody who is a hearing person or somebody who does not know sign language, then I want access to real-time captions. Usually we have employed the professional captioners for like big events or like official meetings, business meetings, etc. But there are often many other cases we found where like impromptu conversations, like side water cooler conversations, even in a workplace, or when you're at home and having dinner with a bigger family or an extended family, and how many people don't opt to get a captioner in those cases. A lot of the hard of hearing people or deaf people would sometimes resort to using lip reading. And even the best lip reading is only so much accurate. You usually have to get a whole bunch of context. So what if we could get access to free real-time captions where, for example, whatever I'm speaking is being shown here right now. And as you can see, let me make this a bit bigger. It also understands context. So if I'm going to say that, hey, I bought a new jersey in New Jersey, you will see that it capitalizes the second New Jersey, which is the place, and not the first one, which is the attire. And it's this kind of real-time captions that we really want to give access. Like, hey, you can just pull it up on your phone instantly and be able to have that 5-minute conversation and not lose out on that.
Yes, and because I know that you noticed with your own family, and I've certainly noticed, probably lots of people watching right now, that if you have a deaf person in the family or somebody who's just slightly deaf, they often find it easier to just sit back from the conversation. And very often I've noticed that you say, excuse me, can you say this again? I didn't quite hear that. And people go, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And suddenly you're not part of the family unit. You're not part of the conversation unit. But here you could actually put up your own subtitles almost.
Yeah, so it's been impressive because like I saw it firsthand as well with my grandmother. She would usually be like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Like to like now finally participating in a dinner conversation. And it's been, we also try to make sure that when, another really interesting benefit that we found was that last year, a few nurses in the NHS UK actually made this like video post and a viral tweet about how you can use this for people with wearing masks, because that actually makes it harder to understand, right?
Oh, yes.
And so people like wearing masks can just pull out this phone and be able to talk to anybody on the other side of a glass wall, for example. And we saw so many heartwarming stories of that happening, including in senior living facilities to even the cashier at your grocery store.
And is that available now?
Yeah, it's available for. It's been available for about 2 years. It's right on your Play Store, and it's something that I really think that a lot of hearing people should also have, so that they can make that access available to somebody who's hard of hearing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because there are, I gather, 7.7 billion people, I think, living on the planet. And of them, close to 500 million people are deaf or suffer from some sort of hearing disability.
The more concerning aspect is that this number is increasing. It's expected to hit about 1 billion people, according to WHO estimates, in just 3 or 4 decades.
And if all those people, I gather, with a hearing disability were to become or to go and live on a separate country, it would be the 3rd largest country in the world?
It would be. They probably will have the loudest parties, but it would definitely be something that it kind of shows the gravity of the situation, that we really need to address this particular accessibility issue.
Well, we've got a video right now. Let's sit back and watch about just what a problem that is and how you and your team and others have been able to address it. Let's have a look.
There are many surprises in life, like babies and puppies. Some surprises are fun and others not so much. Like wondering if your neighbor said feed the cat on Tuesday when you thought they said Thursday. Which is why Google partnered with the deaf and hard of hearing community to create Live Transcribe on Android. It turns the words people speak into words you can read, then and there. But Live Transcribe doesn't just recognize speech. Turn on sound notifications, and it can recognize sounds happening around you too. and send you a signal at the sound of water running, when your baby wakes up, or the puppy's barking, and of course, when an alarm goes off. All of which can help you keep the not-so-great surprises to a minimum and help make sure you never miss out on the good ones.
It's interesting because that's almost something that would enhance all of our lives, not just people who are deaf or hard of hearing. But how does it work? Is that machine learning, or is it AI, or is it a combination?
I would say it's a combination, and it does use that. So the main concept behind it is there's a speech recognition technology. So Google has been working in this field for like multiple decades now. It is used in, for example, Google Meet, YouTube Captions, Assistant, and a whole bunch of different applications like those. And that is the one powering the main speech recognition engine. We use a speech recognition engine to detect the speech itself. And once we convert it into text, then it goes through another model that tries to understand that, hey, does this sentence or this string of words, does this make sense grammatically? And that's where, for example, the extra context comes in. On top of that, we also use more machine learning models to enhance the kind of context of the world for the hard of hearing person. For example, this also detects non-speech sounds. Like if I'm going to, it'll detect that it's whistling. And it can also detect door knocks, so on and so forth. So, which is what led to sound notifications, yes. The video that you just saw. And that creates like a more bigger picture of things that happen completely on your device, completely private, and the idea being just to get access to communication.
If you were at a dinner party where you had different people from different parts of the world, maybe, and they spoke with different accents, maybe even slightly different words from time to time, could it cope with that?
It can. Right now, we are still working. From the 80 different languages, for example, it supports like English UK versus English US versus English India versus English Australia, etc. So it does support a whole bunch of accents for the major languages. We usually prioritize based on the number of people in the world who speak a certain language. And then based on that, we try to improve and make sure that we cover as many accents as possible within that gamut.
Interestingly, you've made a video that demonstrates what a huge difference it can make. It's about, the bit I'm going to show is about your colleague at Google, Dmitry Kandevsky. Who is he? Because I know he's one of the engineers, one of the scientists who works with you, but he has been deaf from birth, I think?
Almost. The main concept is that Dmitry used to use captioning technology, like he would have professional captioners. He's a speech researcher that has been working in this space for over 3 decades. And he had this core concept that, hey, our speech recognition is finally good enough that, hey, if we can just put it on a phone and just keep make it really fast and simple, we can create a meaningful experience. And that is where it started.
Okay, let's have a little look then at this video, because it really does perfectly describe the problems and the problems that can be maybe overcome.
I'm set. Yeah. Ready?
I completely lost hearing when I was 1 year old. Technology provides tremendous opportunities to help people with disabilities. I'm a research scientist at Google, and I'm developing speech recognition in technology. Speech recognition accuracy finally became so good that I could fulfill my dream for whole life, to use speech recognition to communicate with people. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, and how are you?
I'm doing good. What can I get you today?
I would like tea. Like Transcribe is an application that runs in Android. It provides transcription of speech for deaf and hard of hearing in real time.
Dmitry worked with the speech team to develop that technology, and Google has made strides in this in the past couple years, but the app itself is what I've been working on.
That really is a life enhancer. I can see that. And I came across another video where you actually were able to project that speech, not on the phone, but you could project it onto the other person's chest. So that I know it's a funny demonstration, but it shows how one day these things may come into being and enable people to just act more naturally and be able to carry on conversations more naturally. Let's have a look at this.
What we're going to show right now is a skit, just a silly skit that kind of shows all these features in one 1-minute demo. So these guys are practicing for the new episode, the new movie for Ace Ventura. So here, take it away, guys.
Sorry, I was sleeping.
I'm bed department detective.
His chest.
What? A detective from the pet department? How may I help you?
Our record shows that you bought a lot of dog food.
Yes, I did buy a lot of dog food. What is the issue there?
We would like examine your dog.
Oh, okay. Let me call him.
Let me try to find it. Where is it?
So, I have something to confess. The dog food is for me.
I don't believe that you are a dog.
What? You don't believe that my alter ego is a dog?
Prove me this.
All right.
I love the way you guys actually put so much fun into trying to get your message across. But even more of a challenge, I think, must be Project Euphonia, you call it, which is what?
So Euphonia project, which is done in our sister research team, the idea is that people who are sometimes born deaf, they can have what's called a deaf accent, or sometimes who have speech or speech disabilities. Like, for example, people with ALS, like they can slowly not be able to enunciate correctly or properly, like I am right now, I guess. And so the idea with Euphonia is that what if we can create a personalized speech recognition system for those kind of people to be able to communicate better. So if I am not able to speak fluently, or I'm not able to speak with a normative accent, or if I have a very accented speech or a slurred speech, I should still be able to communicate and be able to reach out to different systems and people.
So you can teach that app, for instance, to be able to recognize that as something it can then translate into words on a screen.
That is the eventual goal, where sometimes, for example, many people with ALS can't speak more than like X number of words. So what if we can just, using the existing mobilities that they have, be able to use that to augment and create that full sentence structure based on the other context around.
That is amazing, and you can see how it will develop quite quickly over the years. Let's go on to a project now that most people keep very simple and often very private, but that you turned into an internet event, and that involves your private life, getting engaged and married on the internet with your virtual engagement. Now, I gather usually in India, an engagement is an enormous family affair.
Yes, in Western culture, it's usually two people privately sharing rings or something. But in India, it's more of a two families coming together. I met my wife coincidentally at Stanford in the Bay Area, and we actually bonded on the concept of caving. She herself is a geologist, and so she actually had a reason to go inside caves to look at rocks. I was just there, and it was interesting where we kept chatting back and forth for a whole bunch of years on Facebook. And then eventually when she moved to start her PhD program at Stanford, that's when we reconnected and started talking.
Well, congratulations. But of course, as I said, it was an internet engagement and lots of pictures, beautiful pictures of the way that you were able to hook up with your family and friends in India, whilst I think you were in California, were you at the time?
Right. So this one is interesting. Let me call upon my wife and
Lovely,
start
it's
this
Tanvi.
conversation. But the idea is we
Hello,
wanted to have
Tanvi.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Hello. Hi, lovely to see you. So
yeah. So we had
tell us all about the engagement.
Yes. So the main concept behind the engagement was that we did not really want a physical ceremony as much, but our parents did want to at least like meet each other. So we were like, cool, we'll just have a video chat. And this was back in early 2019, before this became more of a norm across the world last year, where we'll just have a video chat and we'll be there remotely while you guys meet, so that there were also other travel issues that we could not sort, and so this meant that for the first time we had what's like an internet engagement.
And it went down very well with the family?
Oh yeah, both the families had lots of fun. A lot of Indian ceremonies are huge feasts, events, and so things were like lots of good food, and so everybody was raving about the food, which we did not get to eat, sadly.
No. So you're at one end of the world, and your families, Tanvi, your family, and Sagar, yours. Did they meet for the first time for that event?
Almost, I would say, like our parents had met a couple of times before, but like the whole families had never met before.
What was your the reaction of your family, Tanvi?
I think so one interesting thing was they were actually behaving as if we were there physically. So even though we were at Lake Tahoe in California, the ceremonies involve feeding the bride and the groom with some sweets, and they would try and feed the screen, which is really cute.
I've seen that. Absolutely, there's that picture. We were debating earlier. We said, "What's she doing?" And I think she's trying to give you some food.
Yes.
And it's all about the sharing, and because I gather there's also exchange of gifts as well. I mean, this is a very big deal.
Yes. So it worked out well overall. It was completely novel to them, and as we said, this is before COVID, so most things happening over the internet were not as common. And then we also decided to do our wedding in a similar fashion, and the motivation for that we can. Yeah. So one of the things that we really cared about is spending our savings in meaningful ways, and not on like a single day gala or party or ceremony. And we wanted to, for our wedding, instead of doing that traditional large ceremony, spend a significant amount of our savings on good causes. So actually, Sagar and I took out time to discuss the causes and charities that we care about. And that brought us closer, talking about the environment, talking about human and social factors that we want to improve in the world. And then we looked up charities that have the least operational costs and create the most impact all over the world, and decided to donate our savings to those causes and do the wedding on the internet as well.
Yes.
Sagar can tell you more about how that worked out.
Well, yes, I was going to say, I mean, you look at that picture there. This involves a lot of setting up, because obviously the link has got to be right, and your family in India, they've all got to have good cameras working and everything, or the event have been very special. Must have taken ages.
Yeah, so the logistics were interesting. The way we planned it out and we iterated on our idea, because the whole thing was so novel, was that we'll have it over the internet. It'll all be different video calls that people can video call us on the particular day. Because she's lived in 6 different countries, I've lived in 3, we had like friends in a whole bunch of different places. And so to make it easy for them, we were like, on this particular day, you can call us anytime. Regardless of the time zone, you don't have to worry about it. We'll take care of it, which meant that on that span of about 36 hours or so, we were chatting for almost 30 hours on the video. So it was kind of tiring, which I guess is similar to a real wedding. So we had, like, for example, people calling us from Taipei on the bottom, or like Costa Rica on the top. And I think we had calls from 22 different countries.
Yes.
It was a crazy amount. And the way we tied it together with our philanthropic goals was for every guest that comes to our wedding like this, we would donate $100 to the 2 different charities that we had picked, and the guest gets to pick within those 2. So it would also become a good conversation to have with everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, I tend to agree that it's better than spending an awful lot of money on one day that's been and gone, whereas, as you say, it was philanthropic. I mean, I don't know about you, Tanvik, with what you're studying, because you're a geologist, but you're obviously very, very much aware, as is Sagar, of the world, the way the world needs enhancement and help.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, studying the Earth over these number of years and seeing how much change humans have created in such a short span of time, compared to the time that the Earth has existed, that's certainly concerning. And also, in some ways, there are reasons to be hopeful. So, for example, California air in the 1960s was way worse than it is today. So there is reason to be hopeful, and it requires work, continual work, to continue being hopeful, to continue being sustainable, to make the world, keep the world or as good as it is, or make it better for our future generations. And yeah, that was the goal for this endeavor of donating for our wedding.
I bet you can't wait, though, for the pandemic to end and you to be actually physically be able to go and see your family again.
Yes, for sure.
Both of you, yeah. We have lots of questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
I hope so. Oh, let's have a look. Thank you for your work, says Dr. Stephanie in Pasadena. You make a difference. Kudos. I'll make sure to include that in my resources. As someone who works with geriatric populations to help them navigate the healthcare system, I was wondering if there's an app to help the visually impaired continue to enjoy looking up info or sharing info, aside from Audible or expanding info on a tablet or large print. Visual impairment people fill a continent, not an island. There you go. There's another project for you, Sagar. I don't know if you've got anything to say about it. Is anyone working on visual impairment?
There is a project called Lookout by Google. There are a couple of similar apps like Be My Eyes that all try different approaches where you use a phone camera to help, using machine learning or sometimes human volunteers, to help the visually impaired be able to see things.
Jan from New York says, no question, just fascinating. And thank you for applying technology to do good in the world. And actually somebody else with the same sort of thing, John from Guildford in the United Kingdom, says, thank you for this fascinating talk. I'm really enjoying increasing my understanding of this topic through these great examples. And someone else says, Gwen in the United States says, how can we hear your talks? Are they online?
Some of them are, but I guess the next time, if you want to talk, just reach out to me.
Oh, that's a good one. Susan from San Diego says the Mosquito Project is absolutely fascinating. How is such research funded? It's clearly something that can make a huge difference to the world.
It's a mixed bag. A lot of it is also academic. So a lot of our government funding from like NSF, etc., goes into sterile insect technique research, the foundational stuff that goes into this. Some of it is robotics that comes from different academic departments on the whole different side of things to be able to create such a manufacturing facility, for example. Yeah. And then a whole lot of this is also in terms of the healthcare or epidemiology aspects and that research.
And another question says, is the goal to get rid of all mosquitoes? Isn't that bad for the biosphere? That's not what you're doing, is it?
Definitely not. In fact, that is exactly the thing that we want to avoid. So what we do is like we find particular mosquitoes that carry, I think there are over 4,000 different breeds of mosquitoes, and only one of them, the Aedes aegypti, is the one that carries the dengue, Zika, and chikungunya viruses. And then there's another Anopheles that carries the malaria virus, for example. And we want to just make sure that we can catch those ones. And so we don't even target those particular mosquitoes. We just release mosquitoes that are sterile of that exact breed, and they go out into the wild and mate with existing populations and to lead to eggs that don't hatch. And so that leads in a natural decline of the population of just that one breed. So you might still have mosquitoes that bite you, but hopefully they won't carry the virus anymore.
Yes. Judith in Spokane Valley says, I love your choices around your wedding day, both of you. It was a brilliant thing to do. Isn't that nice? And Nancy from Thompson in the United States says, this is absolutely amazing interview. Thank you so much for telling us all about AI and ML, isn't it? And there, oh yes, another one, a particular one. Deborah in Prattville says, is there a live transcribe app for Apple phones?
There is something that we have approached. I think we are open to it. There is a lot of work that we need to do before we can scale it up to more grounds. One way that we have often found is that there are a lot more people with Android phones, especially in places like Asia or Africa, etc., compared to iOS phones. And so because of the limited resources that we have, we try to prioritize something that can have the biggest impact.
One thing at a time, absolutely. Elizabeth from London, Canada says, can you name the app again so I can get it?
Live transcribe and sound notifications.
Live transcribe is the word, right. Irene in New York says, can one use the hearing app to translate from one language to another? So if I speak English, will it translate a conversation with someone who speaks Hungarian?
Yes, there is work in that space. Google Translate last year launched a similar feature where we had aspects of live transcribe merged into Translate, where you can have a continuous long translation happening from one language to another.
And finally, and I do think this is a brilliant question from Daisha in Arlington, how amazing does it feel to create something that makes a real difference to people in the world? How does it feel?
It just feels like there's a whole lot more work to be done.
And there is, I'm afraid, isn't there? Which you'll just go on doing, I guess. Are there any projects? No, I was going to say, are there any projects that you can tell us about that you're working on now? But I mean, what do you think of the future? What will life be like for us in 10 years' time, maybe even only 5 years' time? How will AI and machine learning and the jobs that you do, how will our lives have changed in 5 years' time, do you think?
You want to take a shot?
Yeah, for sure. So I think this is where a holistic thinking about the impact of new technologies comes in. So this is where, in addition to people like Sagar and I who work in technology, I think working with people who work in ethics, in philosophy, in social work, etc., to make sure that we have thought about all of the impacts and not just the good or the bad ones. We've made sure to fit these systems together in the correct way. That comes in, and I think that emphasizes how we really need people who think about different things to come together to make sure that technology does more good than harm. And I think there are a lot of groups approaching this the correct way, where they do think about the ethics, the philosophy, the impact, the different impacts of one system on another. And I think the systems thinking is the way to approach this huge new thing that's coming up.
It's very interesting because my father, who would be well over 100 if he were still alive today, he was a physicist and trained in Scotland, where if you wanted to do a physics degree, you had to do philosophy as well. And I just wonder, I don't know whether that's still true anymore, but I wonder if that is part of a good scientist training now, to have to do something in philosophy, or at least some sort of altruism.
There is an aspect of like an ethics course that a lot of researchers have to do. Like in our grad school, we had to do, for example. It of course covers like the more tactical aspects of like good scientific rigor and ethical research, but it also covers like broader concepts of, like, as she mentioned, like long-term ramifications, thinking through your thought processes. Of course, like it also brings up a whole bunch of examples, like the very famous one from Alfred Nobel to the Nobel Prize, kind of an example.
Yes, yes. Very important, isn't it? Well, you are a shining light, both of you, as far as that is concerned. And it's been such a pleasure to meet you. Oh, and by the way, Karina Hagen sends her love and has sent me a couple of pictures. Should we have a look? We've got some gorgeous pictures, I think.
Whoa,
Yes?
she is strong there.
Lovely, lovely pictures. And there you are. That's your relationship, of course, with Viking Cruises, because they've been so interested in your work and have loved hearing you talk. But all I can say is congratulations to both of you. May you have a wonderful future together, improving our future, if you can go on doing that, because that really is quite something. Thank you very much indeed. It's been a smashing interview. What are you going to do now? Go away and make dinner?
We'll probably get to work, because there's a lot more work in the world to do.
Yes.
Okay, well, you go ahead and do it. I wouldn't want to stop you. Thank you very much indeed, both of you, Tanvi and Sagar. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for the lovely chat.
Thank you. Oh, it's lovely to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there you are. The very human face of new technology. It gives you hope for the future, doesn't it? Now, next week, we'll be meeting the author Bernard Cornwell. He is, of course, the famous writer of historical novels, but who has a fascinating personal history of his own, actually. So he'll be telling us all about that. Some of his best-known books, I'm sure you know, include the Sharp series about that English soldier during the Napoleonic Wars, played on TV in a very delicious manner by Sean Bean. We're going to be discussing his books, his latest adaptation for Netflix, and how he does so much research into so many different historical eras. Until then, do keep safe and well. And by the way, if you are interested in any of the Restart or Welcome Back cruises that I mentioned earlier, I'll leave you with Viking's chairman, Torstein Hagen, to tell you more. Goodbye.
This past year has felt like a long, long Norwegian winter. Over the decades, there have been some stormy ones, but curiosity always got the better of us, and we ventured out anyway. Eventually, with spring comes rebirth. The sun warms the earth, spirits soar, everything begins anew. And many of us realize a fundamental human need to connect with other like-minded people and discover what lies beyond the horizon. Welcome back to the world.
Viking, exploring the world in comfort once again.